The sun was an unforgiving blaze, casting long shadows across the dry, cracked earth of the Old West. The wind carried with it the scent of dust and sagebrush, swirling in a constant dance that seemed to never end. The town of Redstone sat like an old, forgotten relic, its wooden structures weathered by the harsh sun, with only a handful of souls left to roam its desolate streets. Emily stood in the shadow of the dilapidated saloon, her small hands resting lightly on the edge of a weathered barrel. Her eyes, pale and unseeing, gazed straight ahead, her face still as a stone. The wind tugged at her dark, tangled hair, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't see the world around her, but she had long ago learned to feel it with a depth that others could not understand. The sharp rustle of a rattlesnake in the distance, the echo of footsteps approaching her, she sensed them all, as if the world spoke to her in whispers. Her father had sold her. The thought gnawed at her heart, an invisible weight that crushed the breath from her chest. She had heard the words, "She's of no use to me. I need the money." Those words, spoken with cold finality, had been the last she'd heard from him before the cowboy arrived. She had never understood why, or how her father could do such a thing, but that had been her reality. A girl abandoned by her own blood. Her father, desperate and broken, had left her with a man whose name she hadn't even heard. A man cloaked in mystery, his presence as silent and ominous as the shadow of a storm that never quite broke. She felt his eyes on her now, though she couldn't see him. A strange sensation crawled up her spine, as if the air around her were thick with danger, with secrets she had yet to uncover. His hand touched her shoulder lightly, and Emily tensed. His voice came low, like a growl from the depths of a cavern, full of darkness. "Ready, little one?" he asked. Emily didn't reply immediately. She was thinking of the life that had been stolen from her, thinking of the fate that awaited her. She had no family, no home, but she had something no one could take away: her courage. It was the only thing that hadn't been sold, and it was something she would hold onto with every ounce of her being. She squared her shoulders, her chin rising in silent defiance. "I'm ready," she whispered, her voice strong despite the tremble in her heart. The cowboy, his features hidden behind the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, nodded. "We ride." And so she did. With every step, her senses sharpened, her world expanding in ways others could not fathom. The thrum of the horse beneath her, the soft rustle of the wind through the trees, everything's a clue. Everything held a secret. She might not have her sight, but the world spoke to her in ways that words could never explain. As they moved through the desert, the weight of the journey ahead began to press upon her. But Emily refused to let it break her. She wasn't just a blind girl sold to a stranger. She was someone with a fire inside her, a fire that would burn away the lies, the darkness, and the pain. The cowboy glanced over his shoulder, and for the briefest moment, she sensed his eyes dark, calculating, yet something else. There was a story there, a mystery too complex for even her to unravel just yet. But Emily was patient. She would wait for the right moment, for the clue that would lead her to the truth. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Emily breathed in deeply, filling her lungs with the air of the desert, and for a fleeting moment, she felt something stir within her. Hope. Perhaps she would not be just another forgotten soul in this unforgiving land. She would become something more. And as the shadows grew longer around them, Emily knew one thing for sure: the cowboy might have bought her body, but her soul was hers alone. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to walk. The journey through the desert felt endless, and Emily couldn't tell whether the burning heat was a reflection of her own internal agony, or if the sun really was that close to the earth. She could feel the dust settling on her skin, her feet growing heavier with each step, as though the desert itself was trying to swallow her up along with all her hopes. The silence around her was oppressive, the vastness of sand and rocks making her feel even smaller and more insignificant. With every gallop of the cowboy's horse, the world around her seemed to shrink, as if she was sinking into a deep, endless pit. But the greatest weight of all was the burden she carried within herself. Emily had been sold by her own father, and that truth, though simple, was unbearable. Each memory of her father, a figure who had once been unshakable and strong, now transformed into a dagger thrust into her heart. He sold her. He handed her over to a man she didn't even know, without asking her what she wanted. He left her behind, as though she were nothing more than a commodity of little worth. But the doubts didn't stop there. When the pain of losing her father didn't consume her, it was the pain of her own body that made her question her strength. Why did he do this? She constantly wondered. The answer seemed to slip from her mind, like a shadow retreating every time she tried to catch it. She felt there was no explanation that could make sense of it. The cowboy beside her, always silent, seemed like a shadow in her life now. The weight of his presence was as heavy as the desert that surrounded them. He never spoke much, only moving with an unsettling calm, as though he carried secrets he didn't want to reveal. He had watched her in silence ever since he took her, and each of his glances made Emily's stomach churn. He had eyes that she felt, even though she couldn't see them directly. Eyes that belonged to a man who knew the mysteries of the world, a man who might have been a part of them. Over the days of travel, Emily tried to hold on to the hope that perhaps, at some point, the truth would be revealed, and she would understand what was happening. But with each new day, the sense that the answer was becoming further away only grew. Her mind filled with thick fog, and she found herself immersed in a whirlwind of questions without answers. Was her father so full of hatred for her, or had he become lost in hopelessness, not knowing what else to do? Emily felt that the emptiness within her was growing a deep, dark hole that nothing could fill. At night, when the camp was silent, she would walk away a little, trying to distance herself from the shadows that followed her. Lying under the starry sky, she imagined what her life would be like if she were home with her mother, before blindness became her reality. Her mother had always told her that she possessed a rare gift, a way of seeing the world in a way others couldn't, and that blindness wasn't a curse, but a chance to see what others couldn't. But now, everything seemed like a distant dream. Blindness left her vulnerable, and she knew that. She didn't know what her father expected when he sold her. Did he expect her to defend herself against everything coming her way? The doubt was eating her up from the inside. Every time she thought about how the men saw her, how her father treated her, Emily wondered if, somehow, she was less than human. Was she really so weak, so worthless? The doubt spread inside her like a disease. Could she really break free from all of this? How could she fight against a fate that seemed already written, a whole life defined by the choices of others? As the days passed, Emily felt her patience wearing thin. Each night, when she lay under the starry sky, a mounting pressure built within her. It was a sensation of being on the edge of something, a revelation, perhaps, or a decision she would soon have to make. She knew her destiny was in her hands, but she was terrified by the idea of choosing a path. What if she made the wrong choice? What if the decision only led her deeper into the darkness? There were moments when she wanted to scream, when she wanted to run away, and yet she knew there was nowhere to go. The cowboy had never treated her with cruelty, but his presence was suffocating, like an invisible prison that kept her chained to her own mind. And what if he was part of the mystery of her sale? Or was he simply an accomplice in the story her father had tried to hide? One night, when the desert wind sliced through the camp with the force of a silent storm, Emily could no longer be sitting on a cold stone. With the darkness surrounding her, she felt a growing anger inside her, a rage not just at her father, but at everything and everyone who saw her as less, who saw her as an easy target. She would no longer be a victim. She would not allow her life to be defined by someone else. That was the key she needed to find, the strength she had within herself, the courage she carried, stronger than any blindness, deeper than any despair. She closed her eyes and made a silent vow to herself. No matter how dark the road ahead, no matter what the cowboy or anyone else tried to do to her, she would not give up. And with that thought, a spark of strength ignited inside her, lighting up the darkness and guiding her steps in the cold desert night. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden glow across the desert that seemed to promise something. For Emily, the soft glow of the late afternoon didn't bring peace. It brought a growing weight. The silence of the vast landscape around her seemed to belie the rising turmoil inside her. The cowboy beside her, once a silent figure, was now more of an enigma than ever before. But now, something new was in the air, something that left Emily's steps heavier, her heart beating faster. The wind had a different quality that day. More than the typical desert heat, there was something else, something that felt like it was carrying secret. Something was about to happen. When they reached a small valley, Emily felt a shift in the air. She could hear it, the low hum of voices in the distance, mixed with the sound of horses trotting. It didn't take long before an unexpected figure appeared in front of them. An old man with worn clothes and a wide-brimmed hat, his skin marked by years of exposure to the unforgiving sun, appeared out of nowhere. He approached with the bearing of someone who knew the weight of things, someone who carried old secrets. "She's here," the man said in a rough but firm voice. He looked directly at the cowboy as if they shared some unspoken understanding. "The girl, the farmer's daughter. We know what she is." The cowboy didn't react, but Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The man continued, unaware of the tension in the air. "You know what she has. You know what's behind all this," the man said with a cryptic smile, devoid of humor. "What your father did. It wasn't just for money, was it? Emily couldn't understand the words. What did he mean? What did her father know that she didn't? A growing pain took hold of her chest, a void that expanded with every word. But before she could ask, the cowboy stepped forward, blocking the view of the man. "Get out of here, old man," the cowboy said curtly. "It's none of your business." The man laughed quietly, the sound hollow and echoing in the desert. "Maybe it is, but time is running out, and she will discover the truth. They all will." With those words, he turned his back and disappeared into the dust of the desert, leaving Emily even more confused and anxious. But deep inside her soul, something was stirring, a feeling that made her believe the man's words weren't empty. Something was behind all of this, something that tied her father, the mysterious cowboy, and even herself together in ways she couldn't yet understand. In the following days, Emily noticed a change in the cowboy's behavior. He was more tense, more vigilant. The calmness that had once radiated from him now seemed to be replaced by an air of constant alertness. At night, when the two of them camped under the starry sky, she would hear him mumbling to himself in low, inaudible words, something she couldn't quite make out, but that made her feel like they were on the edge of something bigger than she imagined. One night, as the cowboy moved away to add more wood to the fire, Emily felt an urge to search for something. Her curiosity had turned into a desperate need. She walked over to where he usually kept his belongings, her heart pounding with every step. It was there, in the shadows of the night, that she found an old, crumpled piece of paper hidden inside a wooden box. When she carefully unrolled it, her fingers brushed lightly against the faded lines of ink, almost illegible. It was a map, not very large, but clearly detailed. The lines indicated something, a mountainous region near a small town Emily had only heard of in stories her father used to tell when she was younger. But what caught her attention the most was the small note written at the bottom of the map. What did this mean? Blood. Emily shivered as she read the word. Her father had mentioned something about the land and blood, but never so directly. He had spoken of a secret he had, something he swore to protect. But protect from whom? And why was there so much resistance to letting her know more? She held the map up to the light of the fire, trying to make sense of what was before her. The map, the words. She was at the center of something bigger, something her father had never wanted her to know. As the days passed, the tension increased. Emily began noticing more and more strange figures lurking at a distance, men with furtive glances, dressed in clothes that didn't seem to belong in the region. These were men from her father's past, people he had run from. Emily heard them mention words like payment, debts, and the old man, as if the past was coming to the surface and she was the key to something more, something they didn't want her to find. But what exactly was it? The cowboy, who had once seemed like a simple guide, now appeared to be a prisoner of his own history. Every time he looked at Emily, there was a restlessness in his eyes, as though he knew time was running out. He knew what was at stake, but Emily couldn't yet comprehend the full extent of this game. What was he hiding from her? And more importantly, what was he willing to do to ensure she never knew the truth? As the mystery of the map deepened, Emily herself found herself torn. Her mind, already scarred by the betrayal of her father, was now confronted with the idea that she might be the key to unraveling a mystery her father had tried to hide from everyone. But why her? Why had her father chosen her? A young blind girl, helpless. The doubts multiplied, and the fear of the truth began to turn into a desperate need for understanding, for finding some way to make sense of everything that had happened. The map was the first step, but now Emily knew there was more to be revealed. More secrets her father had left behind, secrets that she had to uncover before it was too late. The emotional tension was escalating as Emily neared the truth. Every new step brought her closer to understanding what was at stake, but it also pushed her further into an abyss from which she didn't know if she could return. The mystery unfolding before her wasn't just about clues and secrets, it was about her own identity, about who she was, and what it really meant to be part of a story that was beyond her understanding. Emily's future was now tied to the fate of the Old West, to the blood and the land her father had tried so hard to hide. She would have to decide which path to follow, a path that could destroy everything she knew, or a path that would lead her to the truth, however painful it might be. The heat of the desert seemed to have increased in the past few weeks, and with it, the weight on Emily's shoulders grew heavier. The nights were long, and the days even harder. The map, now nearly disintegrating in her hands, seemed more like an enigma, a key that didn't want to fit. Her mind, already overwhelmed with so many unanswered questions, began to waver. She knew she was close to the truth, but she also felt that every step was leading her further into darkness. The cowboy beside her didn't help, his tense and distant posture ever present. He who had once seemed like a reluctant companion now appeared almost unrecognizable. His eyes, which had once met hers with a cold, impersonal gaze, were now opaque, as though hiding something much larger, something Emily couldn't yet understand. And no matter how much she tried, he offered no answers. Why had he brought her this far? One afternoon, as the sky was a brilliant shade of blue and the air seemed to weigh down on them even more, Emily felt that something was about to happen. It was as though the desert itself was challenging her. The silence around them was deafening, but it was the presence of something unexpected that broke the isolation. She heard the riders in the distance before she saw them, the sound of hooves cutting through the hot earth, the imposing trot of several horses, and soon a threatening silhouette appeared on the horizon. A gang, the same mysterious men she had heard about, now closer than ever. They were a shadow of the past, now approaching, no longer as nebulous figures, but as a real, palpable threat. "Emily," the cowboy said, his voice rougher than ever. He didn't look at her, but she knew he had sensed the gang's presence before she had. She felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Now there was no escape. They were closing in. The map, which she now held with more care, seemed to be calling her. The secret her father had left behind, the one he had tried to hide, was about to be revealed. But fear gripped her. "I'm not capable," she thought. "I'm not strong enough to face this." She looked at the cowboy, and he, as always, remained silent. What did he expect from her? For her to run away? No, that was no longer an option. She was at the heart of this story now. With a deep breath, Emily stepped away from the cowboy's protection and walked toward the approaching men. She knew she couldn't hide behind her blindness or someone else's security anymore. She was alone, and her future was in her hands. "I know what you want," Emily said, her voice more firm than she ever thought it could be. Her hand gripped the map tightly, feeling the pressure of the worn paper, but it remained strong. The gang halted at a safe distance, watching her with curious and cynical eyes. The leader, a tall, rugged-looking man, dismounted his horse and walked toward her. He smiled cruelly, as if amused by the scene unfolding before him. "You know nothing, girl. You don't understand what's happening. You don't understand who you are," he said, his words dripping with disdain. But Emily didn't falter. She had reached a moment of clarity. Everything her father had done, everything he had forced her to face, was now standing before her, collapsing with every word. She could feel the power of her own voice growing inside her. She was no longer the blind girl her father had sold. She was a woman with a purpose, a woman with the courage to face the truth, no matter how terrible it was. "You're wrong," Emily replied, her voice calm, but full of a strength that surprised even herself. "I know more than you think, and what's at stake now isn't what you think it is." The man stared at her, momentarily taken aback. He looked at his companions, and then, with a sharp movement, he approached even closer. But Emily didn't step back. She felt the fear. Yes, it was a familiar feeling, an old friend that had always been by her side. But now, she saw it from a different perspective. She didn't see it as an obstacle anymore. It was just an emotion, and she could use it, not let it consume her. "I will face them," she thought, the decision forming in her mind like a beam of light breaking through the clouds. The men of the gang laughed, but Emily didn't hear them. She didn't hear anything but the beating of her own heart and the whisper of her courage growing inside her. She knew this moment was crucial. It was now or never. She raised the map in front of her, and with a decisive gesture said, "I know who you are, and I know where this ends." The leader hesitated, and in that brief silence, Emily felt something inside her alive. She didn't know everything, but she knew enough. She knew her destiny was in her hands, that she had the key to solve what her father had hidden. She wasn't searching for answers anymore. She already had them. Now, she was ready to face the consequences, to change the course of her story. "I will walk my own path," Emily said, her voice filled with a renewed strength, authority echoing through her words. The gang fell silent for a moment, and finally, the leader stepped back, his eyes locked on her. He saw the determination in her, something he hadn't expected from a blind girl. But more importantly, he saw that Emily was no longer willing to be a pawn in his game. She was the player now. The cowboy, who had been silently observing everything, finally spoke, his voice barely audible, but filled with unexpected respect. "You made the right choice." Emily didn't look at him. She knew her journey was just beginning. But for the first time, she knew exactly who she was. She was no longer a victim, no longer a piece in the hands of others. She was the heroine of her own story. And with that certainty, she took the first step toward what lay ahead, her heart beating with the confidence of someone who had, at last, found her strength. The desert was alive with tension, the air thick and oppressive as Emily stood at the edge of the ravine, looking down at the winding path below. She had come to the place marked on the map, a hidden valley nestled among jagged rocks and sparse vegetation. The gang was closing in, and this time, it wasn't just about finding the secret her father had hidden. It was about surviving. The sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Emily could feel the weight of it, the heat on her skin, but she also felt the weight of her purpose stronger than any heat, fiercer than the fear gnawing at her stomach. This was the moment. There was no going back. She glanced to the side where the cowboy stood, his face stoic as always, but there was something different in his eyes now. Respect? Regret? She couldn't tell, but there was no time to dwell on it. "You'll have to face them alone," he said, his voice low and flat, the weight of finality in his words. "I've done what I was paid to do." Emily nodded. She didn't need him anymore. In fact, she had never needed him. The road that had brought her to this point was hers alone. She had spent too long letting others determine her fate, but that ended here. Today, she was going to face the gang, the mystery of her father's past, and most importantly, her own fear. With a quick breath, she reached into the folds of her jacket and pulled at the map, tracing the lines with her fingers one final time. The path was clear now. The treasure, whatever it was buried just ahead. The only thing standing between her and the truth was the gang. She heard them before she saw them, the sound of horses galloping, the pounding of hooves reverberating through the ground. The gang was closing in, and they were ready for a fight. "Move," the leader shouted, his voice carrying across the valley. "She's got something we want." Emily stood tall, her heart racing, but her mind sharp and focused. She had come too far to let this slip away. The map, the clues, the whispers of the desert, it all led her here. And now she was ready to face them, ready to face her own fear. The first man came charging toward her, his gun drawn. Emily didn't hesitate. She moved quickly, sidestepping his charge with a fluid motion that caught him off guard. He swerved just in time, but not fast enough. She used the momentum to throw herself behind a large boulder, the heavy thud of hooves echoing in her ears as the gang closed in around her. The leader was shouting orders, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. Emily's pulse quickened, but she focused on what she had learned: how to think quickly, how to use the environment around her. She had spent weeks walking the terrain, memorizing the sounds of the wind, the shifting of the earth beneath her feet. She knew this desert as well as anyone could, and now she was going to use that knowledge to her advantage. Her hand tightened around the map again. "It's not just about surviving anymore," she thought. "It's about showing them that I'm no longer the scared girl they thought I was." As the first man closed in, she threw a small stone from her pocket, sending it clattering on the other side of the rocks. The sound distracted him just enough for her to move swiftly behind him, a blur in the heat of the desert. She kicked the back of his knee, sending him stumbling to the ground. In one smooth motion, she wrenched his gun from his hand and pointed it toward the rest of the gang. "Stay back," she warned, her voice steady but full of fire. She wasn't asking for mercy. She wasn't looking for a way out. She was making her stand, here and now. The leader looked at her, his eyes wide in disbelief. You're just a girl," he spat, his sneer a mask of arrogance. Emily's lips curled into a determined smile. "And I am not afraid of you." With a swift motion, she fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed, and for a moment, there was silence. The gang hesitated, unsure whether to charge or retreat. Emily's mind was racing, every move calculated. She couldn't let them back her into a corner. She needed to end this now. The leader motioned to his men, and within seconds, they were advancing again. But this time, they weren't as confident. Emily had proven herself a threat. She ducked behind another boulder, quickly shifting positions as they tried to surround her. Her senses were heightened, her body moving with precision and purpose. Then, in a sudden move, the leader lunged toward her, aiming to tackle her to the ground. Emily felt his weight crashing into her, but she was ready. She dropped to the ground, pulling him off balance, and before he could recover, she grabbed a nearby rock, smashing into his hand, knocking the gun out of his grasp. For a moment, everything went still. "You are not in charge anymore," Emily said, her voice low and final. The gang stood in stunned silence, their leader writhing on the ground, clutching his injured hand. Emily stood over him, her breath heavy but steady, her hand gripping the map tightly. The pieces were all falling into place. This wasn't just about fighting off a gang, it was about taking control of her own story, her own destiny. "I'm the one who decides what happens next," she said, her words echoing through the valley. The gang members, realizing they had lost their leader's control, looked at each other. unsure of what to do. Emily didn't need to wait for their decision.
She knew she had won.
They had underestimated her at every turn, but now they saw her for who she truly was, not the blind girl they thought was helpless, but a woman who had found her strength in the hardest of circumstances. The gang scattered, retreating into the desert, their confidence shattered. Emily watched them disappear, her chest rising and falling with the intensity of the moment. She had done it.
She had faced her biggest fear, her greatest challenge, and come out victorious.
But the victory wasn't just in defeating the gang.
The real victory lay in what she had discovered about herself.
As the dust settled and the silence returned to the desert, Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe.
She had come so far, from the girl who had been sold by her father to the woman standing tall and unshaken.
The transformation was complete.
With the map in hand, she turned and made her way toward the hidden valley, the treasure waiting to be uncovered.
But now, the treasure no longer mattered.
The real prize had been her own transformation, the confidence, the strength, and the courage she had found within herself.
That was the true legacy of her journey. And as she walked into the sunset, the desert now felt like home.
She had finally found her place in it, and she knew she could face whatever came next. As Emily stood on the edge of the desert, watching the setting sun cast long shadows across the horizon, she felt an overwhelming sense of change settle deep inside her.
The journey that had brought her here, from the girl who had been sold by her own father to the woman who now stood victorious against the odds, felt like a lifetime of pain, fear, doubt, and ultimately, strength. The desert, which had once seemed vast and unforgiving, now felt like a place she knew intimately. It wasn't just the land that had changed, it was her.
She wasn't the frightened girl who had once believed that her blindness and her father's betrayal would be her life's defining moment.
No, she had overcome those fears, faced the truth, and emerged stronger than ever.
As she reflected on everything she had been through, the fights, the doubts, the painful realization, she realized something.
The treasure she had been searching for wasn't buried in the desert or hidden within the map her father had left behind. The true treasure was the courage she had found within herself, the strength to face the darkest moments and come out on the other side, the ability to stand on her own and decide her fate, no longer allowing anyone else to control her. The challenges had been difficult, the road long and hard, but in every trial, she had found something deeper than she ever expected. She had discovered her true power, a power that didn't rely on sight, wealth, or even her father's approval. It was a power born of her choices, her courage, and her resilience. The journey had been about much more than survival. It had been about transformation. The real treasure was the person she had become. Now, as she stood in the silence of the desert, with the vast expanse of the land before her, Emily asked herself a simple question. What treasure am I still searching for?
She realized the answer was clear.
The treasure wasn't something tangible, it was the courage to face whatever came next, the courage to keep walking, to keep fighting, and to keep believing in herself, no matter how many obstacles life might throw her way. This realization wasn't just for her, it was for all of us. Emily's story, her transformation, shows us that the greatest treasure we can find is not wealth or fame, but the courage to face our fears and keep moving forward.
We all have our own struggle, our own battle, but just like Emily, we can find the strength to overcome them.
Her journey was a reminder that, in every challenge, there is the potential for growth. In every fear, there is the opportunity for courage.
And in every moment of darkness, there is the possibility of discovering our own light. As Emily walked into the sunset, she carried not just a map to a hidden treasure, but a map of self-discovery, a map that showed her that the real victory was in finding the courage to embrace who she truly was, and to live her life on her own terms.
And so, the call to action is clear. Reflect. What is the greatest fear you've overcome in your life? What did you discover about yourself in the process? Share. Send this story to someone who needs a reminder of their inner strength and the courage that lies within them. Subscribe. Receive more stories like this, stories that inspire and empower every day. Because, just like Emily, you have the power to transform your life, to face your fears, and to walk your own path. The treasure is already within you. The only question, will you have the courage to embrace it?